Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're venturing into some really fascinating, maybe unexpected territory.
Yeah.
It's all sparked by a recent online discussion. We've got this YouTube transcript.
Right.
And it just throws together, personal health mysteries, predictions that feel almost, well, supernatural.
And some pretty wild theories about reality itself.
Exactly. So our mission today, we want to pull out the most surprising connections and insights for you.
Absolutely. It's a conversation that really leaps between things that seem unrelated. You've got well-being, then foresight, then the fundamental nature of what's real.
And that's where it gets interesting, right? Finding the links.
That's where we dig in.
Okay, so let's jump right in. There's something quite personal in the source material first.
Uh-huh.
One of the individuals, they went through a major health challenge, a gut issue.
The one that was a mystery for how long was it?
An incredible 51 years.
Wow. 51 years.
Yeah, and after all that time, they finally had surgery. Grace Harbor Community Hospital. Sounds like a real turning point.
Yeah. A resolution, finally.
They mentioned losing a significant portion of their intestines, which sounds serious.
Definitely.
But thankfully, the recovery outlook is positive. And here's a quirky detail.
Oh.
The surgery. It happened on Friday the 13th.
No way.
Yeah, and apparently there was this feeling like this was the perfect time, almost destined, for this really long-standing problem to finally get resolved.
That makes you wonder about timing and fate, almost.
It really does. And what's fascinating is how this personal story then connects immediately to the next topic.
Which is prediction.
Exactly. The discussion pivots right to a remote viewing prediction, something in the crypto community.
About someone well-known potentially passing away, right? Saw that bit.
That's the one. And it raises this really interesting question, doesn't it? How do we make sense of these kinds of, intuitive glimpses?
Yeah, how do you separate the signal from the noise? What's real information, what's just random, what's contamination, as they call it, our own biases.
Exactly. Which brings us nicely to the core of our dive today. Prediction itself. What is it? How might it work?
And the source explores two really different angles on this.
Webbot technology and remote viewing.
Polar opposites in some ways.
Let's start with the webbots. The basic idea, as we understand it from the source,
Come on.
is that the emotions behind the language we use online, they can act like these subtle signals.
Like a kind of collective psychic impression leaking out.
That seems to be the premise, yeah.
Okay, so the webbot system, it isn't reading every word for meaning. That'd be impossible.
Right.
Instead, it's using algorithms to track the overall emotional intensity.
In huge amounts of text.
Massive amounts, hundreds of millions of words from all over the internet, right? Crypto forums, gardening sites.
Car sales, bikinis, jet airplanes. The source mentioned some funny examples.
It did, but the point is the diversity. It's looking for shifts in how strongly people are feeling about topics based on the words they choose. Emotional quantifiers.
So it's like taking the emotional temperature of the internet, topic by topic.
Pretty much. And if a usually calm topic, like, say, gardening, suddenly starts generating way more emotionally charged language than normal, that spike, that change in emotion,
could be a sign that something interesting is about to happen related to gardening.
Precisely. That's the core idea. And here's where it gets, weirder. The system then flags unusual words that start popping up alongside these emotional surges.
Okay.
The example given was a surprising increase in people mentioning UFOs.
In gardening forums.
In gardening forums that were also showing that heightened emotional intensity.
Right, so the emotion was already up.
And then UFO starts appearing more than usual in that context, leading to the, quote, wild-ass guess.
That someone involved in gardening might encounter a UFO.
Exactly. It's totally non-obvious. A connection based purely on linguistic patterns and emotional shifts, not logic.
Wow. Okay, that's quite a leap. But it shows the method, how it finds these potential connections just by tracking language and feeling.
And then there's another layer they mentioned, Plutchek's wheel of emotions.
Right. For you listening, think of it like a map of different emotions, how they relate. Anger, joy, fear, anticipation.
Yes, but what's fascinating here is how they've apparently overlaid this model onto the human body within the webbot system.
Onto the body. How does that work?
It allows it to detect even more specific, unusual patterns. For example, if that gardening forum shows both rising emotional values and the sudden jump in words like blood or body parts.
Okay. That sounds ominous.
It might suggest a higher chance of accidents, injuries, that kind of thing being discussed or, well, anticipated unconsciously within that group.
So the collective subconscious is maybe hinting at future physical events through these weird linguistic coincidences.
That's the theory presented, changes in the words we use and the emotions driving them.
It's a really different way to think about prediction. Very different from, say, the digibyte point-of-sale system prediction that was also mentioned.
Ah, yes.
That wasn't deliberate, was it? Not like the UFO guess.
No, exactly. That was described more as serendipity, a fortunate coincidence.
How so?
You had separate emotional upticks around the word digibyte,
Okay.
and also around phrases related to exchanging goods for currencies, normal commerce stuff.
Right.
But these two things spiked emotionally in unusual linguistic company near each other in the data more than expected.
And that led to the connection. Digibyte. Point of sale.
That's how it was framed. Not someone consciously saying, I predict this, but the data itself showing an unexpected emotional resonance between those concepts.
Which circles back to this really intriguing core idea. Could humanity, be psychic? Inherently.
Honestly.
Perhaps that we're all, picking up on stuff that hasn't happened yet, and it just leaks out into our language.
It hints at a profound interconnectedness, doesn't it, if that's the case?
The source even mentions body consciousness. Old sayings like, don't step on a crack.
You'll break your mother's back, yeah.
Could that reflect some deep, maybe forgotten, unconscious awareness? Future consequences linked to physical actions now?
It's speculative, of course, but it fits the pattern. And even our emotional state. The idea that future-focused language might link to anxiety on that emotional wheel, while past-focused language links more to depression.
Like our emotions are a kind of temporal compass.
Yeah.
Pointing us towards past or future concerns.
Potentially, a subtle indicator in the language. But then the conversation shifts gear again towards the possible physical mechanisms. How could psychic stuff even work?
Okay, now we're getting into the weeds.
A little bit. There's talk of auras.
Auras, like energy fields.
Yeah, energetic fields, supposedly around living beings. Some people claim to see them. Reiki masters, massage therapists were mentioned.
Right, and Kirlian photography. That's the thing with the electrical discharging.
Exactly. Presented as possible visual evidence, maybe, of these energy bodies.
And this energy body, it's described as layered. Like an egg.
An egg-shaped sphere, yeah. Getting denser towards the physical body at the center.
And here's where it got really out there for me. The idea that personal karma, for want of a better word, might actually reside in these outer energetic layers.
And over time, it manifests physically.
That was the suggestion. Even connecting back to that person's 51-year gut issue.
As potentially being the physical result of something building up in those energetic layers over decades.
Yeah. It's a very different model of body, illness, cause and effect.
Yeah.
Long-term energetic patterns influencing physical reality.
It's a huge question.
Yeah.
And it leads pretty naturally into the other prediction method discussed.
Remote viewing.
Right. And the source makes a crucial point here.
What's that?
It's not presented as, something you just believe in. It's framed as a functional technology.
Okay, functional technology. Based on what?
Based on the idea that our sense of being separate individuals might be, well, fundamentally wrong, an illusion.
An illusion. How so?
The analogy used is fascinating. Humanity as appendages of the mass.
Appendages?
Like fingers on a giant hand. We think we're separate fingers, but we're all connected to the same palm, the same source.
Ah, okay. So if we're all connected.
Then remote viewing isn't so strange. It could just be a form of telepathy.
Accessing information from another part of the hand.
Exactly. Maybe even across time. Accessing information regardless of location or when it happened or will happen.
And they distinguish this from intuition, right?
They do. Intuition is described more like distilled wisdom, knowledge boiled down from past experiences, maybe even past lives, innate knowing.
Okay.
Whereas telepathy, which they see as underlying remote viewing, is more active, a constant, ongoing information exchange.
This implies some kind of bigger field where all this information exists.
Precisely. A greater field of consciousness, a universal pool containing all information.
And our individual consciousness
is just a part of it. Our brains act like filters, the source suggests, tuning into specific frequencies within that vast ocean of data.
Okay, hang on. Let me see if I got this. The web bots, they're tapping into this field indirectly, unconsciously, picking up the emotional echoes left in language.
That seems to be the idea. People are subconsciously communicating their awareness, their knowing about future potentials through the emotional charge in their online words.
Okay. And remote viewing then?
Mm-hmm.
That's presented as a way to tap in consciously.
More or less. It involves learning to quiet the noisy, everyday analytical mind.
The primary awareness.
Right. And allowing your subconscious awareness to kind of reach out into the field to retrieve specific information about a target.
This brings up that interesting point about how the information moves.
Yeah.
Like if you're trying to remote view something in the past, the info about that target, its location, its time, it somehow has to get to the viewer's awareness now.
Right. It has to travel, conceptually speaking.
Which makes sense. But then is remote viewing time travel? The source says no.
Correct. Not time travel in the, H.G. Wells sense.
Why not? What's the reasoning?
It's tied to a really specific kind of out there model of consciousness and the universe itself.
Okay.
The idea is that reality isn't continuous. It operates on this incredibly rapid creation-destruction cycle, a pulse.
How rapid?
The number given is 22 trillion times a second.
22 trillion.
Yeah. So in this model, consciousness doesn't move through time like we imagine. It experiences time as these incredibly fast, discrete snapshots, these pulses of creation.
So the past, it doesn't exist anymore as a fixed place you can go back to.
Not in that model, no. Which raises concerns about something they called cryptomnesia.
Cryptomnesia.
Basically, unintentionally accessing existing memories, things you already knew or read somewhere, but thinking it's a fresh perception of the past. It feels real, but it's just memory recall.
Ah, okay. So viewing the past is tricky, but the future.
The model suggests the now is actually quite broad, or spongy as they put it, when looking forward, but much narrower, a hard edge when looking back.
Spongy future, hard-edged past.
Right. Which might allow consciousness, if tuned right, to pick up information from that still-forming, spongy future.
It's also suggested we all live slightly in the past anyway.
Because of perception delay, yeah. The time it takes senses to process, signals to reach the brain, we're always experiencing a fraction of a second after things happen.
Okay, this 22 trillion times a second number, that's incredibly specific. Where on earth does that come from?
It's apparently derived from a connection between Avogadro's number,
It's chemistry constant, right?
Buckminster-Fuller's experiments with geometry, specifically tetrahedron containers,
Bucky Fuller, okay.
and the gram molecular weight of hydrogen. It's presented as some kind of fundamental calculation related to the threshold of material reality actually forming.
Wow, that's deep physics territory. Or maybe metaphysics.
It blurs the lines, doesn't it?
Definitely. We even get a personal anecdote about meditation. Experiencing a void.
Yes, Zen meditation was mentioned. Experiencing that fundamental emptiness, which seems to align with the idea of reality blinking in and out of existence trillions of times a second. There's a void between the pulses.
And they connect this to Bruce Lee. His speed.
Huh, yeah. That's a fun tangent. The idea is someone with, supreme physical mastery, like Bruce Lee, could potentially move within that void between the recreations, essentially operating faster than the refresh rate of reality.
Moving between the frames.
Kind of. A really unconventional way to think about speed and reflexes.
The conversation then touches briefly on experiments trying to change the past using remote viewing.
Yeah, the results were described as suggestive, but not conclusive. It's just really hard to design experiments that eliminate all other possibilities.
Pattern recognition, contamination, suggestion.
Exactly. Very difficult to isolate the effect, if there is one.
There's also an interesting bit about how different remote viewers perceive things differently.
Right. Some seem to get broader pictures, others finer details. It suggests individual factors are huge.
Like their methods, their personal frame of reference.
Likes, dislikes, biases, maybe even gender demographics. It all seems to influence what information gets accessed and how it's interpreted.
Which brings us back around to predicting something really messy, like crypto prices.
Yeah, if the future is this forming wave with countless variables,
then crypto must be extra hard.
It's compared to Brownian motion, that random jiggling of particles. Because it's so decentralized, driven by so much raw human emotion, it's close to real randomness.
So how do the web bots even attempt crypto predictions then? If the numbers online are noisy or manipulated.
That's the interesting part. They don't trust the online price numbers directly. The focus shifts entirely to the language.
Okay.
Remember that famous Bitcoin forecast? $408 to $428.
Vaguely, yeah.
According to the source, that wasn't based on chart analysis. It was based on the words 408 and 428 appearing written out unusually often in the text datasets.
Seriously, not the numerals, but the words.
That's what was claimed. So it wasn't predicting the price per se.
It was predicting that those numbers would become linguistically significant, like they'd appear in headlines or big discussions.
Exactly. Predicting the narrative around the numbers, driven by those underlying emotional currents the bots track.
That makes a weird kind of sense given the method. And crypto is seen as easier to track emotionally.
Somewhat, yeah, because it invented its own specific language.
Total FOMO.
Right. Words that don't have many competing meanings outside the crypto context, so the emotional signal is clearer, less ambiguous for the bots.
Compared to older words that might have shifting emotional meanings.
Exactly. The source mentioned needing to constantly tune the lexicon because the emotional weight of existing words can change. An example given was a word shared with Turkish suddenly gaining new emotional significance because of some event in Turkey.
Oh, the system has to constantly learn and adapt.
Seems so. It's all about tracking the shifting sands of language and emotion.
They mentioned a time traveler test, too.
Ah, yeah, a clever thought experiment. If someone claimed to be from the future,
Their language might give them away, using slang that doesn't exist yet, or referring to future tech.
potentially, yes. Careful linguistic analysis might spot anomalies. It's the same principle applied to, say, detecting lies about the past.
Like the Philadelphia experiment example.
Yep.
Inconsistencies in language used over time.
Right. If the story changes linguistically in ways that don't match how language naturally evolves, it's suspicious.
Okay, then things take a turn towards the really conspiratorial. Teams changing the past. Historical scrubbing.
Yeah, that was quite a tangent. The Smithsonian was mentioned sort of jokingly, or maybe not so jokingly.
And that anecdote about dumping bones.
Allegedly, yes. Large, unidentified bones, possibly giants, supposedly dumped off the California coast during the Depression.
To hide them.
The implication is yes, a deliberate effort by someone to conceal or erase parts of history that don't fit the standard narrative.
Which leads to the idea that maybe there's a real history, known only to insiders.
A hidden curriculum, yeah. Different from what most of us learn.
And this gets personal again, with stories about one person's father in the military.
Right. Encountering something described as evil in D.C.
And a really disturbing experience in Vietnam, possibly involving aliens?
That was the suggestion. These personal stories add a layer of, firsthand subjective experience to these very big claims.
The Vietnam story also involved those weird night vision goggles.
With a red filter, yeah. Supposedly allowing the user to see things not normally visible, described as demons or winged creatures.
Yoni stuff. Perception beyond the normal spectrum.
And the source notes how these alien themes seem to pop up everywhere now, even in crypto.
Speculation about blockchain's origins, yeah. Though the source itself clarifies, blockchain is a concept.
A distributed consensus mechanism, a slow database, basically. Not necessarily alien tech.
Right. Shifting back to markets, the recent Bitcoin surges.
Interpreted as big players, institutions maybe, buying in, anticipating a breakout.
And the effect of all this fiat money pouring into crypto.
Potentially huge for the old system. The argument is, as crypto value rises and people use it to pay off fiat debts,
mortgages,
loans, that fiat money effectively disappears from circulation. It settles the debt. It doesn't recirculate the way banks like it to.
Banks prefer refinancing, keeping the debt alive.
Exactly. So this paying off debt dynamic, fueled by crypto gains, could create a creeping liquidity crisis for traditional finance. Less money flowing around.
Affecting lending, maybe the housing market eventually. A shift from wanting debt to wanting to be debt-free using crypto.
It points towards a potential massive transformation of the monetary system away from debt-based fiat.
Towards something new, heavily influenced by crypto. Despite all this potential disruption, there's still this excitement noted.
About the volatility, yeah. Compared to surfing a big wave. Thrilling, even if dangerous.
And locally, near the person speaking, more Navy activity. Helicopters, jets.
Linked to a REMAC exercise, a general increase in military presence noted, and the concluding thought for that section
was that aliens might just be a metaphor now for all the weird, unknown, complex forces at play.
A pervasive symbol for the unexplained influences shaping our world.
Which leads us perfectly into this final piece we looked at, a prompt given to ChatGPT.
Building on all this, yeah. UFOs, reality, consciousness.
The prompt imagines a scenario. UFO visits are confirmed, and they reveal a totally new physics.
The autologic model, it was called.
With anti-gravity, instantaneous travel, and this idea of a fundamental guiding consciousness woven into reality.
The ontology, like a sentient operating system for the universe.
And the prompt asked, how would that revelation change everything? Science, consciousness, society.
And ChatGPT's response outlined some massive shifts, as you'd expect.
Science, a total paradigm change. Current physics obsolete. Exploring an interconnected, maybe sentient universe becomes the new frontier.
Consciousness itself gets redefined, not just brain activity, but fundamental to the cosmos, the mind as a receiver for this universal ontology.
Spirituality might see a huge renaissance. Religions adapting or fading as we grapple with this universal consciousness idea.
Technology would be revolutionized, obviously. Anti-gravity, instant travel. All based on understanding this new model, this harmony with the sentient universe.
Society might shift too, away from pure competition towards cooperation, as we become more aware of synchronicity, interconnectedness.
But the key question raised was, why were we deaf to this before, if it's real?
And the answer suggested, our attachment to empirical proof, skepticism, a materialistic culture focused on separation, not unity.
It might take undeniable direct evidence, like confirmed contact, to force that shift in perspective.
Ultimately, it paints a picture of a future where knowing becomes more like a dialogue with the responsive cosmos, inner and outer exploration merging.
A completely different way of being.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, wow, we've covered a lot of ground, haven't we?
We really have. From that very personal health story, with its hint of the uncanny.
Through the mechanics of web bots and remote viewing. These really unconventional prediction methods.
All the way to these mind-bending theories about consciousness, reality, hidden history.
It just highlights how things we think are separate, health, tech, physics, spirituality, might actually be deeply intertwined.
It pushes boundaries, definitely.
Yeah.
Makes you question assumptions about the world and our place in it.
And that ChatGPT response about the ontology, it leaves us with a really potent final thought for you, listening. If reality is influenced by some kind of fundamental, perhaps sentient guiding intelligence, communicating in countless subtle ways, what quiet messages might you be overlooking in your own life right now? Those little coincidences, the gut feelings, the odd patterns.
How might shifting your perspective, paying closer attention, reveal something deeper?
Could tuning in reveal a layer of meaning or guidance that's usually missed? It's definitely something to chew on long after this conversation.
Indeed. It's an invitation, really, to a more personal exploration of reality and your own connection to whatever underlies it all.
Thank you for taking this deep dive with us today.
Until our next exploration.